Alright, so this is going to be kind of a weird one. Um, I'm just making myself some breakfast, but I kind of wanted to record this. So, for anyone that doesn't know, the bullshit going on in the D&D community right now with the OGL and licensing and all that good stuff, it's kind of a mess. And rightly so. Wizards of the Coast is shooting themselves in the foot, to put it lightly. This is, if Wizards of the Coast does not reverse course, then D&D is going to die another death. Something that happens very frequently for some reason. D&D has what, almost 50, just about 50-year history? It's like 49 years old, I think, this year. And it just keeps dying for some reason. It died first with, is it mold? No, it's some schmutz. Cutting stuff up for breakfast. I mean, it died first with TSR. That was what, in the 90s? I think it died its first death. It was going strong in the late 70s and 80s, but then the 90s it kind of timed out, and TSR was not doing a good job actually managing it, and all that garbage until TSR died, and I'm pretty sure that was when the Wizards of the Coast bought it, but I mean, I'm not a historian. So, that was the first death. Then, 3rd edition was pretty good, to my understanding. It was pretty good. They had to clean it up with 3.5 because they made it way too complicated. Again, to my understanding. They made it too complicated. They had to clean it up with 3.5, and then for some reason they decided, oh, let's cash in on like World of Warcraft and other video game popularity and make 4th edition, make an online like BattleNet style portal and virtual tabletop to take advantage of this and get people to spend their money. And that was another death that it died because that was simply not popular. Like, especially back then, people did not play D&D online. It wasn't a thing. They just didn't do it. Bulls. And while that's different today, it's still, you know, like, there's still so many people that play in person, myself included. But, so one of the main, quote, I guess, issues, like that was the second death that died, and then it got revitalized with 5th edition, which, again, I'm not here to try to do history lessons or anything like that, but that's a nasty looking pepper. It's all nasty. So with 5th edition, it made a big comeback, and 5th edition is like the most popular D&D has effectively, like, ever been. One, because there's more people now. Population is larger, technically. Not gonna take these yet. But also, there's a lot more in modern culture that contributes towards it. There's Stranger Things, there's Critical Role, there's all sorts of, like, quote, non-pure D&D properties that contribute towards D&D being popular. So, you know, that's cool. Really, it's a good idea to latch onto those cultural zeitgeist type stuff. The problem is, now, Wizards of the Coast has decided to cash in on that and try to be a video game again, and is likely to die the same death, or actually it's not the same death, but the reasons for it come from the same place. So, once again, this video isn't to talk about the OGL. There are so many creators that do that better than me, and I have 8 subscribers. So, what I want to talk about is adaptation, moving to new systems, learning new systems, and in particular, adapting an ongoing campaign into a new system, which I don't know if that's something like me and the games that I'm involved in are actually going to do, especially the Curse of Strahd game that I'm in. Curse of Strahd is through and through a D&D module. It's all the D&D gods, it's all the D&D, it's the D&D setting, so, you know, that's an official setting. There's no way we're gonna change to a new system there. And also, one of the other things for that game is we're not using D&D Beyond. Worst case, one of our players that does use D&D Beyond is gonna have to learn Roll20 a little bit, which, oh no. But you know, that game, we're not moving to a new system. That's not happening. But for our other games, namely my Site 27 campaign, Erlmeyer, Fallmeyer, those three games, those three games, that might happen. And if we do, I don't know what system we'd be going to, because while all 3 of those are effectively homebrew settings, technically Site 27 isn't. It's an SCP setting, but not the point. All 3 of those settings are, quote, they're not Dungeons and Dragons specific settings, we'll say. So you don't like need D&D as the system as much, because they're your own homebrew settings. So they could be moved and adapted to whatever system. Now, what are there's going to be plenty of issues that you run into when adapting to a new system. And we can look at Critical Role as an example of this. When they first started streaming their home game, I don't know if they just did it or they had like 1 or 2 sessions before this, but they moved from Pathfinder to 5th edition. And in the early games, you can see that all the time. Like, Matt asks for fortitude saves and reflex saves and will saves instead of the stat-specific saves of 5th edition. A lot of the players, their characters and their classes are different. In particular, Percy has an entirely homebrew fighter class, because in Pathfinder, he was playing the gunslinger class, which is, you know, its own specific class. So this subclass, Matt designed a whole homebrew subclass specifically for Percy, the gunslinger subclass. And it has so much stuff in it because it's trying to adapt what that actual class used to do. It's got like the grit points, the tinkering tool proficiency and working on your own guns and all this stuff, where compared to a normal, quote, normal fighter subclass, like the champion subclass gets like improved critical, you get some half proficiencies in some stuff, you get another fighting style. It's like, you know, there's so much more in the subclass, or in this homebrew one, but it makes sense. And then also Vexalia, the Beastmaster Ranger, they suffered a massive power hit because the Beastmaster subclass, or the base player handbook version of the Beastmaster subclass, is kind of trash. So, moving to that version, Vexalia got a lot weaker. In particular, Trinket did. Her pet bear. Such that after, like, Trinket was still relevant for a while, but at least at first he was, no, I can't even say that. He wasn't relevant for a while. He lost his relevancy real fucking quick. But, like, that was such that, Matt had to design, you know, a little magic item to save Trinket all the time. That little, like, Pokeball amulet that whenever Trinket went to 0 HP, he would just disappear into the amulet, which happened, like, in the first round of almost every combat Trinket was involved in. So, you know, when you're when you're changing systems like that, that can be an issue. But especially, one of the main things to consider there is changing from Pathfinder to 5th edition was not that big of a change. Like, you know, a lot of the core concepts are you know, the same. Like, Pathfinder has fighters and rangers and clerics and barbarians and all the same kind of base classes and base class fantasies and stuff like that. You know, it just does it differently. All the, you know, the mechanics are a little different, and one of the main difference between Pathfinder and D&D is Pathfinder is more crunchy. It's more like 3.5 edition of D&D, because that's what it's based on. But so, you know, there's more rules, there's more stuff. And also there's more ways to play that game in particular optimally. Like, you know, at specific levels, like you take a specific feat because feats are cheaper in that game, but you kind of need the feats, and if you don't take the right ones, you could potentially make kind of a crappy character. That's one thing that D&D 5e does really well, that even if you don't optimize, your character's going to be okay. Like, you'll never be worthless. Unless, of course, the DM is handing out all sorts of crazy magic items to everyone but you. But that's a different argument. Now, even with a system as close as that, like, you still might run into this issue of, in your adaptation from one system to another, you might not have a perfect analog for what you're doing in the system you're moving away from. For example, I was looking up, you know, Pathfinder stuff last night, just trying to learn a little bit about the system. And I was looking up classes. And in particular, as far as I could tell, according to the one wiki that I found, I was looking at Pathfinder 2nd edition. I don't know if this is, that wiki was just incomplete and it didn't have all the information, but according to that wiki, Rangers don't have a subclass. They don't have any subclass choices. Again, that might be wrong, and I might be looking at incomplete information. But, so, how do I take, say, Hanich, my Gloomstalker Ranger, and turn him into a Pathfinder Ranger instead? What are the choices I make? What are the, like, how do I do that? And I'm sure, especially in the coming days, coming weeks, there will be plenty of creators that work on guides and stuff like that, like how to adapt, how to change a Gloomstalker Ranger in 5e to a similar equivalent in Pathfinder. Stuff like that. Or you can look at, say, my Samurai Fighter, Raskris. In Pathfinder 1st edition, there is a Samurai subclass for the fighter, but it works very differently, to the point that I don't know if that would be the right subclass to pick for Raskris, for that same kind of feel for what the 5e Samurai does. So these are a lot of different choices. Or would you just, or do you just do this and accept that they're going to be a little bit different, i.e. like the crappy Beastmaster from Pathfinder to 5th edition? Do you just accept these changes and just kind of roll with it? You're like, all right, yeah, we're just different now. Because how much of your character designs are, dictated largely by the choices you make. Like Vogue, my kobold artificer, he does a lot of magic because that's the way the artificer is described. They instill magic into devices. So for that reason, he effectively does magic. But if we move to a system where I had to use the inventor subclass, where instead of doing magic, it was all devices, I would probably just roll with that for Vogue. He still uses a little spark of magic to start his devices or something, but it would largely be non-magical for that example. Nope, I don't want that spatula. That one's shitty. So there's a lot of those things. Or my Curse of Strahd game that's likely not to adapt to something else. If I wanted to adapt it, I was looking through the barbarian choices. I don't know what I would change Sinlir into. And that's just 5e. Another system I was looking at is called Icon. It's a smaller, we'll say, indie TTRPG made by I don't know if it's, I know it's made by the artist that did the art for Lancer and a webcomic I really like, 6 Billion Demons, or Kill 6 Billion Demons, sorry. It's made by that dude. I like this system a lot. It separates narrative, play, and combat, but, you know, the classes there's less classes to pick from. There's 4 base classes, and they each have 4 subclasses. So there's a lot less choice. But it's also, like, there's a lot more wiggle room and stuff. Like, it says, you know, if you're the stalwart, which is like the fighter, the warrior class, if you're a stalwart, you just have a weapon of some kind. That's it. It just says you have a weapon, however you attack, and it's kind of up to you. And your damage and stuff is determined by your class and your level and a lot of other stuff. There aren't even stats. So, you know, there's pros and cons, and there's so many different systems, and you gotta, it'll take some time to really, like, look around and see exactly what you like, because overall, I have to say, I like 5th edition. It's got, you know, a really good blend of, you know, lots of different, like, there's game mechanics and there's rules to learn, but it's not too difficult. It is definitely a little obtuse in some ways, but there's enough wiggle room in a lot of places that, you know, the DM can just kind of go, yeah, this is what happens. Like, this is how we're going to determine this, which is both good and bad. Because some of my players, or some of the people some of my friends really hate that about the system, whereas I really like that. I don't like a system that theoretically, I might not like a system where, like, something happens and, like, okay, we got to look up that rule to see exactly how it works, otherwise blah blah blah, and everything has its own specific little rule, which, you know, a lot of, like, quote, simpler systems, they do. It's like with Icon in narrative play, the way it works is anytime you need to do, quote, a skill check or see if something succeeds or not, you roll a number of d6s, and the number of d6s, which, an aside, this is, like, d6s are a really common kind of mechanic for a lot of these types of, I guess I'll say newer, more indie, I guess. I don't like those newer, simpler indie descriptors. I don't like those, but I don't like those descriptors specifically, but that's what I have to go with. Like, basically, you roll a number of d6s, and you take the highest of that number, and that determines whether you succeed or not. So, and you get more d6s, like, if you're better at the skill. So, like, if you're a sneaky rogue type character, and you have to sneak, you might roll, like, 4d6, and then you take the highest of that. And also in this system, it's like 1 to 3s are failures, 4 and 5s are, like, moderate success, or, like, success with a cost, and 6s are, you did the thing, good job, and then, like, double 6s are a crit, basically. At least that's how Icon handles it. So that does feel a lot simpler. Like, you know, you can't get all these, like, obscure bonuses. Lovely, it's okay. I know. You don't like existence. So, you know, you can't get all these obscure bonuses like a plus here, a plus there. Like, you know, it's not affected by this stat and your proficiency bonus. So, like, your stealth is like +9. And you know, I'm going to tell the dog to be quiet. So we're going to... Lovely. It's okay. You're fine. She sees people outside. I'll let her live her life for now. So you're going to have to deal with some barking in this video, I guess. Mushrooms going. So I like that you can't get all these obscure bonuses and like there's no stats to determine anything, but sometimes stats can get in the way. But I don't think they're useless. I think stats are still a good thing, and I probably will gravitate towards a system more like Pathfinder that does have stats and is more crunchy. But a lot of the people I play with aren't crunchy. So I don't know. I don't know what system we're going to go with. We might just stick with 5e for a while. And especially that's another issue. I'm wondering, several of these players, I don't know if we move to a different system, if they're going to stick around. Like, they might just like, no, I'm not learning another system, bye. Like, or they might not care about these things. You know, there's a lot of factors. And that's fine. Like I was telling my one friend that's a DM in 1 or 2 of the games I'm in, and is a player in like all the other games I'm in, except the Curse of Strahd game. And I told him, like, oh, I'm looking at these systems. They've got some more mechanics and they've got some more rules and stuff. And their reaction was, oh no, like, you know, they don't want to learn all these new rules because they're not as good with rule systems and stuff. So that's a factor. Like, we could just keep going, keep rolling with 5e and just not support anything and not use D&D Beyond and just kind of roll with it. That's perfectly fine too. There's plenty of other character builders and character managers and stuff like that. So, you know, there's a lot of questions there, especially because several of the... This is a more minor point. In the Fallmeyer campaign, 2 of the characters, Nelos, the Drake Warden Ranger, and Seraphina, the Draconic Bloodline Sorcerer, their stories are tied up with their specific classes and their specific subclasses. So if we go to Pathfinder, do they have a Drake Warden equivalent? Like, do you just play a sort of Beastmaster Ranger and just flavor it as a dragon, and that's it? Like, how exactly do you do this? Which is why I think we're going to stick with 5e for that game. But really, you know, at the end of the day, I really have to hope that Wizards of the Coast reverses course. I don't have a lot of faith that they will, but I hope they do. Because, again, they're going to kill their game this way. Like, they'll still hang on, and they'll still probably make enough money to survive, because, you know, half of the player base might leave over this, and half of them are just going to go, oh, we don't care about this, and they'll just buy the books passively and just do whatever. But, you know, I hope they realize these things, especially as, like, the big creators leave. Who knows what's going to go on with Critical Role. So, you know, there's a lot of factors. Yeah, adaptation is tricky. Is there anything else I wanted to say about this? I don't think so. All right.